John Fogerty had one of the most recognizable voices in American rock music. When Creedence Clearwater Revival exploded in the late 60s, their sound was everywhere. Songs like Proud Mary, Bad Moon Rising, Fortunate Son, and Green River owned the airwaves. Fans thought the band was unstoppable. They thought the man writing all these classics must be living his dream. But behind the scenes, John was living anything but a dream. CCR's music became legendary, but John later discovered something shocking. He didn't own his music, not the masters, not the publishing, not anything. The songs he wrote with his heart, the melodies he created alone, the words that defined a generation, legally, they belonged to someone else. How did this happen? It all began with a contract signed before CCR was famous, a contract that seemed harmless at the time, but would later destroy friendships, break trust, and turn John's life into a decades-long legal nightmare. When the band blew up, the business side grew complicated. Fantasy Records and its owner, Saul Zaentz, took control of the publishing rights. John, young and excited to be making music, didn't understand what he had signed away. By the time he realized, it was too late. Music that John wrote from his soul, songs that told stories of America, struggle, and fire, belonged 100% to the record label. This wasn't just a business problem, it was personal. John felt robbed, betrayed, and helpless. This chapter marks the beginning of a war that would last over 50 years, a war that cost him relationships, money, happiness, and even the will to make new music. And it all began the moment he learned the greatest songs of his life were no longer his. As Creedence Clearwater Revival climbed the charts, John Fogerty started noticing something unusual. The more famous CCR became, the more power Saul Zaentz held over their work. The record label wasn't just managing the music, it owned it completely. Every time a CCR song played on radio or TV, every time a movie used Fortunate Son, the money didn't go to John or the band. It went to the label. John had signed the contract when he was young, broke, and dreaming. He didn't have lawyers. He didn't understand copyrights. All he wanted was a chance to get CCR's music out to the world. But the papers he signed gave Fantasy Records everything. At first, John tried to ignore it. CCR was too busy touring, performing, and recording to think about paperwork. But when the band fell apart in 1972, reality hit hard. Without CCR, John suddenly saw what the label truly controlled. The songs, the royalties, the publishing, the licensing. It was all gone. The worst part? Anytime he wanted to perform his own CCR songs live, he was still promoting and enriching the same company that had taken his rights away. His frustration slowly turned to bitterness. He felt trapped. His creativity was chained. His spirit was exhausted. This contract didn't just cost him his music, it cost him his peace of mind. John began to see Saul Zaentz not as a businessman, but as an enemy. Someone who profited off the sweat, talent, and emotional labor he poured into every lyric. And this wasn't just about the past. This contract would follow John everywhere he went, through the courts, through the press, and even into his personal relationships. The contract wasn't a piece of paper anymore. It was a ghost haunting every corner of his life. The legal battles didn't just affect John's relationship with the record label. They tore apart the band itself. Tom Fogerty, John's older brother, once stood proudly beside him on stage. They were family, partners, brothers in music. But the fight for the rights pushed them far apart. Fantasy Records understood something powerful. When a band is divided, it's easier to control, and they used it. While John fought against the unfair contract, the other CCR members, Tom Fogerty, Stu Cook, and Doug Clifford, didn't always agree with his approach. Some believed John was being difficult. Others believed the fight wasn't worth it. This is exactly what Zaentz wanted: divide and conquer. Tom Fogerty eventually sided with the label, believing John was being unreasonable. This decision shocked John. Their bond, built since childhood, began to crumble. John felt alone. He felt betrayed. He felt like everyone around him failed to understand his pain. The contract had become a wedge, one that destroyed CCR's unity and broke lifelong relationships. What hurt John the most wasn't losing the band. It was losing his brother. Tom's decision to take the label's side created a wound that never fully healed. In interviews, John later said, "Saul Zaentz was like my invisible enemy, but the real damage was losing Tom." And the tragedy didn't end there. Before Tom passed away, the brothers never repaired their relationship. John never got to make peace or say goodbye properly. The contract didn't only steal his music, it stole his family. This chapter marks the darkest point in John's emotional journey, the moment he realized he wasn't just fighting for rights, he was fighting for his identity. In the mid-1980s, things reached a boiling point. Saul Zaentz sued John Fogerty for something unbelievable. He sued John for sounding too much like himself. Zaentz claimed John's solo song, "The Old Man Down, the Road," was too similar to CCR's "Run Through the Jungle," which John himself had written years earlier. This was absurd, but John still had to defend himself in court. Imagine standing on trial for writing music in your own musical style that you created. John was forced to pick up a guitar in the courtroom and show the judge how the chord progression was different. It became one of the strangest moments in rock history. But this trial drained John emotionally. It humiliated him. It pushed him to the edge. He couldn't believe that someone who didn't write a single note of CCR's music could sue the person who wrote all of it. Even when John won the case, the victory felt hollow. The damage to his spirit had already been done. The lawsuit made John ask hard questions. Why was he still fighting? Why couldn't he let go? Why did his music, the music that belonged in his heart, belong to someone else on paper? This chapter solidified something deep inside him. He would never rest until he got those rights back. This wasn't just business anymore. It was personal. And for John Fogerty, the courtroom was only the beginning of a lifelong battle. After the exhausting lawsuits, the bitterness, and the broken relationships, John Fogerty did something drastic. He stopped making music, completely. For almost a decade, John stepped away from what he loved most. The joy he once found in songwriting was buried under anger and betrayal. Every time he tried to write something new, he remembered his songs didn't legally belong to him. And that killed his inspiration. John described these years as living in a fog. He felt like he had lost his purpose. Music wasn't just a career, it was his identity, and now it felt dangerous to create, because every note he wrote might spark another lawsuit. He stopped performing CCR songs altogether. Fans didn't understand. They begged him to play the classics, but John couldn't do it. He refused to generate money for the people he felt had destroyed his band, his brotherhood, and his peace. He said, "Those songs were like my children, and someone stole them from me." During these years, John tried to live quietly. He raised a family, tried to heal, tried to rebuild emotionally, but something inside him stayed unsettled. He wasn't done fighting. He couldn't be. The injustice was too deep. These silent years didn't break John. They sharpened him. They strengthened his resolve. He knew that one day, when the moment was right, he would rise again, not just as a musician, but as a man determined to reclaim what was his. This chapter was the pause before the storm. Everything changed when John met Julie Kramer, the woman who would become his wife. She wasn't just a partner. She was the flame that reignited his passion for music and life. Julie listened to John. She heard the pain in his voice when he talked about CCR. She understood the scars he carried, and instead of telling him to move on, She encouraged him to fight back. Julie helped John see himself again, not as a victim, but as a creator and a warrior. She motivated him to write again, to perform again, to reclaim the joy the lawsuits had stolen. Slowly, John picked up his guitar. Slowly, the melodies returned. Slowly, the fire inside him began to burn again. With Julie's support, John released new music. He stepped back on stage. He started performing CCR classics again, not for fantasy records, but for the fans who'd stuck by him. Julie also helped John channel his frustration into action. She became his partner, not just in life, but in strategy. Together, they planned the long road to reclaiming his music. For John, this chapter wasn't about lawyers or contracts. It was about healing. It was about rediscovering love for his craft and for someone who believed in him. Julie once said, "John was born to make music. I just helped him remember that." This chapter marks the rebirth of John Fogerty, stronger, wiser, and ready for the fight ahead. Just when John began rebuilding his life, Saul Zaentz launched another attack. He sued John yet again, this time for defamation, claiming John insulted him in a song. The song was Zons Kant Dans, a satirical track about a greedy pig who steals money. Many listeners believed Zons referred to Zaentz. Zaentz didn't like that. He demanded millions. This shocked John. He had already dealt with absurd lawsuits, being accused of copying his own music, but this felt even more personal. Zaentz wasn't just protecting his business. He was trying to destroy John's reputation. But something was different this time. John wasn't alone. Julie stood beside him. Fans supported him. The music world recognized the injustice. And John fought back harder than ever. He refused to apologize. He refused to back down. He refused to let Zaentz silence him. After a long legal battle, the lawsuit was dropped. John walked away victorious again, and more confident than ever. This chapter proved something important. Zaentz was powerful, but he wasn't unstoppable. John realized the only way to truly win wasn't through one lawsuit or one moment. It was through perseverance. This second attack didn't break John. It hardened him. It made him more determined to one day reclaim the rights to the music that defined his life. The war wasn't over, but the tide was turning. With new strength and support, John Fogerty began rebuilding his legacy. He created new albums like Centerfield, which became a major success. The title track became a sports anthem and proved that John's creativity was still alive, still vibrant, still his. Fans welcomed him with open arms. They celebrated his return. They honored his resilience. John began touring again, playing to sold-out crowds, reconnecting with people who had waited years to hear him perform. This comeback was more than music. It was therapy. It was empowerment. It was Every show reminded John of the joy he once felt on stage. Every cheer from the crowd reminded him why he had fought so hard. But even as he performed, one truth followed him. He still didn't own CCR's music. Fantasy Records continued earning millions from his songs. Movies, commercials, soundtracks, all used CCR hits, and John saw none of it. But something new was happening. A new generation of musicians, from Springsteen to Foo Fighters, began praising John Fogerty as one of America's greatest songwriters. His influence was everywhere. His legend kept growing. And with each passing year, people began questioning, why didn't John own the music he wrote? The pressure slowly began to shift. This chapter marks the moment when John realized something powerful. Even if he didn't own the rights yet, he owned the respect of millions. And that respect would eventually help him win the final battle. After decades of suffering under Fantasy Records, something unexpected happened. Fantasy was sold. Not to Saul Zaentz, not to someone connected to him. but to Concord Records, a company with completely different leadership and values. This changed everything. Concord admired John Fogerty. They respected his work, they knew the history, and for the first time in 40 years, John felt the record label wasn't working against him. They were listening. Concord began licensing his songs more responsibly. They communicated openly. They even helped reconnect John with his own history. But one thing still hadn't happened. They still owned the publishing rights. John wanted one thing more than anything: ownership, not favors, not gestures, ownership. He had waited decades. He had fought lawsuits. He had lost a brother. He had survived emotional breakdowns. He had rebuilt his life. Now, with Zayant's gone and new leaders in place, John sensed something. His moment was coming. This chapter marks the turning point, when the impossible finally started to feel possible again. In early 2023, after nearly 50 years, something historic happened. John Fogerty officially bought back the rights to Creedence Clearwater Revival's music. Not leased, not licensed, not borrowed, owned. For the first time since the early 1970s, the songs he wrote, the songs that defined his soul, finally belonged to him again. When the news broke, the music world exploded. Fans cried. Musicians celebrated. Rock history changed forever. John himself said it felt like a resurrection. He described the moment as lifting a weight off his heart, a weight he carried for half a century. Imagine writing masterpieces like Fortunate Son, Proud Mary, Have You Ever Seen the Rain? Down on the Corner, Who'll Stop the Rain? And finally, after decades of pain, owning them again. This wasn't just a business victory, it was a human victory. John proved something powerful. Contracts can control paper. Lawsuits can control money. But no one can stop the heart of an artist determined to reclaim his legacy. This chapter marks the moment John Fogerty won the war. A war that almost destroyed him, but instead made him stronger. Today, John Fogerty stands not only as one of America's greatest rock songwriters, but as a symbol of artistic justice. He fought the longest copyright battle in rock history. He lost friendships. He suffered emotionally. He was taken advantage of. He was sued for sounding like himself. He was betrayed by the system that should have protected him. And still, he kept going. John's story teaches musicians everywhere: know your rights, protect your art, stand your ground, never stop fighting for what you created. Now, when John performs CCR songs on stage, something incredible happens. He smiles. For decades, those songs brought him pain. Now they bring him joy. He plays them with pride. He plays them with love. He plays them as the rightful owner. John Fogerty's journey isn't just a music story, it's a human story. A story about resilience, injustice, perseverance, and redemption. After 50 years, he finally controls the music that shaped American culture. And he earned every second of that victory.